And one of the emails I occasionally get, again, is people just itching for some reason to give up. It's very limited, and compared to the volume of email we get, about 1%. But people are like, I'm done. I've said this before on the show. I don't mean to repeat myself, but it's important. I get this email, I'm done, Dan, I'm done. Everything is I'm done. We lose the Supreme Court case, they're done. An election's lost, we're done. Something doesn't turn out, we're done. I'm not done. I'm never done. If you want to be done, that's up to you. I don't do done. Done isn't my doing. Done, no done, I don't do done. You want to do done, you do done, I don't do done. Done isn't my thing. And I want to recommend a book to you, if you'll allow me. It's Viktor Frankl's book. Many of you have read it already. It's a very, very popular book. It's been around for decades. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. It's Viktor Frankl's story of what everyday life was in the concentration camps in World War II Nazi Germany and outside of Germany too. He talks about what everyday life was like there, to live under the threat of death every day. It's an amazing book. It's not a hard read. I'm almost done. I picked it up yesterday. I'm about 3/4 of the way through. It's not an easy book to read. He doesn't talk about the big, because we know the historical big tale of the extermination of millions of lives, Jewish lives under the Nazis. We know that. He talks about what everyday life was like, and it's a really harrowing tale of survival. And there are 3 takeaways, and I wanted to bring it up in light of the very limited number of people who really sometimes just, I get it, are very upset, but they just want to bail. Lesson number 1, I'm saying takeaways from the book so far. Frankl says, what he learned through all this torturous life in a concentration camp, under the constant threat of death, that life's not really about seeking pleasure. He attacks the Freudian mythology, that it's more about seeking meaning. And one of the things I brought up on this show often, and I will continue to bring up from now until I take my last breath, is you being here, the fight for things we believe in, core values, liberty, freedom, economic liberty, healthcare liberty, education liberty, things we can go out there and fight for every day matter. It's not about the search for pleasure. There's only so many cars you can buy and homes you can buy. Having been on most ends of the socioeconomic spectrum, from pretty poor to doing pretty okay, I can tell you that, listen, money doesn't buy happiness, but the lack of it can pretty much guarantee you misery, but it definitely doesn't buy you happiness. That is not it is a cliche, but it is very true. Meaning buys you happiness. And this fight going on now, whether it's in Maricopa County for the Georgia election laws or elsewhere, this fight matters. Please don't walk away from it, ever. You will find no meaning in walking off and trying to walk out of the boxing ring as the other guy is whooping your butt. There's no meaning in that. And when you read Frankl's tale of never giving up, despite a torturous existence that's hard to read, I think you'll be inspired to say, all right, things aren't really that bad for us, relatively speaking, to where these people were. Second, critically, we must at all costs combat totalitarianism. There is a streak on the left right now. I'm not talking about all Democrats, but I am most definitely talking about the radical left, that I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, is all in on totalitarianism. All in. The same tactics used by socialists, communists, and fascists are the same tactics being emulated right now by radical leftists in America. Speech suppression, Antifa-like terrorism, BLM-like terrorism, full-blown racism, stigmatizing people because of their skin color with things like identity politics, critical race theory, and white privilege. These are all tactics used by fascist, totalitarian, deadly, torturous regimes in the past to destroy and devalue human life. And it is up to us, when you read Frankl's tale in Man's Search for Meaning, when you read his tale, you will say to yourself, you're darn right, we should never, ever, ever quit, because if we ever wind up anywhere close to where those people were in that concentration camp, ever, anywhere within even the realm of that, you will say to yourself, I want to use a different word, but you would say to yourself, damn, I really should have fought back sooner. This fight is coming to your door soon. Your kids are being indoctrinated. Your freedoms are being taken away. You're being ordered to do things in strict violation of a free and fair life. This fight cannot be avoided. There is no quit and there is no done. I don't do done, and you shouldn't do done either. Finally, one last takeaway from this book, which is really amazing. Frankl talks about the torture of the everyday existence there, how edema, swelling in his knees. He couldn't bend his knees from the lack of, the nutrition. They were given a square of bread a day and some, watery soup. They had no nutrition. They had no vitamins. They didn't even brush their teeth. He talks about the torture of sleeping, 9 and 10 people to a couple of wooden planks where they all had to sleep side by side. By the way, no pillows, obviously, or anything like that. So their heads, they would get these crooks in their heads. And how if you woke up in the morning and showed any sign of weakness at all, you would be, air quotes, selected. Selected for what? Selected for death, the gas chamber. So no matter how badly you were in pain, he talks about digging a water tunnel at 2 degrees Fahrenheit with shoes he couldn't tie shut because his feet were so swollen and icicles building in his shoes, but that he couldn't stop working because if he stopped working, one, he'd freeze to death. He had to generate body heat. And second, he'd be killed. He talks about how a lot of people just gave up and they, quote, ran into the wire or ran into the fence. Apparently, there were electric fences surrounding one of the concentration camps he was in. Some men couldn't take it anymore and just ran into the fence and basically electrocuted themselves. Horrible things to read. But when you read about how he got through it and the torture of his everyday existence, the inhumanity of the beatings, you say to yourself, yeah, we've had some setbacks, but it ain't anything like that. Folks, the people coming for your liberty are not kidding around. These people are playing for keeps. We have to avoid at all costs any lurch towards totalitarianism, or at all costs. If I may, one last story, from the book, he talks about the inhumanity of beatings. And you would think he'd be talking about the pain from being beaten with rifle butts by Nazi soldiers and sticks. But he makes the point in the book clearly that it wasn't the blows that hurt him as much. I guess he got used to that, the beatings. He said what bothered him most about constantly being beaten by these absolute life loser zeros, these murderous thugs, he said was the inhumanity of it and the unfairness of it all. He was a doctor who had done a lot of good in his life, and that he would just randomly be beaten by some human piece of garbage for no good reason at all, just for the sheer joy that person got out of it. He said that's what bothered him most of all. It wasn't the pain. It was the inhumanity of being treated like a beast. It's an amazing book and a reminder for all of us about the dangers of concentrated power in the hands of depraved human beings, and why we should always be on the side of liberty and freedom, and why we should never, ever, regardless of what happens, back down from the fight, because the consequences of losing to a totalitarian elite are just devastating. Whew. That was heavy, folks, but it's a profound book.